My life in Austin flowed smoothly, like water in a Texas river in spring, without storms, but also without much excitement. Every morning started the same way: a cup of black coffee, a short run around the neighborhood, and then a shift at the gym in the south of the city. The place was small, almost family-friendly, with local regulars who knew me by name and always smiled when I met them. I was in good shape, I felt useful and needed, but inside there seemed to be a gaping hole, some kind of inexplicable emptiness. Maybe it was a longing for real intimacy, for someone who not only asks questions about the correct squat technique, but looks deeper into you. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. Everything changed one hot July day. I had just finished a circuit workout with an elderly couple and was about to wipe beads of sweat from my forehead when the front door of the gym opened and he walked in. Thomas. He was tall, lean, with tan skin and a confident gait. He was wearing simple gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt, but he looked like he had just walked off the set of a sports nutrition commercial. His eyes, brown, with a faint sparkle, slid around the room until they settled on me. He came up slowly and, smiling, asked, "Hello. I'm looking for a way to shake up my program a bit. Are there any killer exercises to get started?" There was lightness in his voice, almost jokingly, but the look in his eyes, confident, tenacious, said that he was not just here to warm up. I smiled briefly and nodded at the dumbbell rack. "You can always start with the classics." "Let's see what you have," I said, already feeling a professional note in my voice, but the thought flashed through my mind: he's not a beginner. We started training. His movements were precise, his technique almost flawless, but he didn't flaunt it. On the contrary, he listened attentively, asked questions, as if it was really important for him to hear my opinion. I was used to smug customers, to phrases like "I know everything," but Thomas was different. His interest didn't seem feigned. He focused, laughed at himself when he was wrong, and thanked for the adjustments. "Do you always take squats so seriously?" He joked once when I asked him for the 5th time not to round his back. "Only if I don't want anyone to complain about lower back pain," I said with a smile, handing him a towel. This first session turned into 2, then into a week, then into a month. Thomas started coming every day, always at the same time. He brought coffee, shared the news, and talked about his restaurant in the suburbs, a cozy place where, in his words, it's all about the sauce. Especially the one his mom, Karen, cooks. She's been making it since she was a child. The secret recipe. "No one cooks like her," he said with pride, and there was sincere affection in his voice, but with a slight admixture of something unexpressed, maybe sadness or fatigue. We chatted after class, sat on benches outside the gym, drank protein shakes and laughed. I could feel something warm growing between us, a long-forgotten feeling pounding in my heart. I tried not to rush things. Too often my sympathies ended in nothing, but Thomas did not disappear. He was constant, stable, like an anchor in my troubled inner harbor. One evening, when we were closing the gym, he turned to me. His face was serious, but there was a mischievous twinkle in his eyes. "Hey, Emily," he began a little hesitantly, "I've been thinking. What if you come to my house for dinner sometime? Will you meet my mom and try the sauce I keep telling you about?" I laughed, more out of surprise than amusement. "Are you sure she'll be happy to have a stranger at the table?" He shrugged. "If you come, I'm sure she'll be thrilled." I didn't know what to say right away. It was more than just a meeting. It meant a step into his world. But I said yes, maybe because I was really curious, not only what the sauce was, but also who Thomas was when he wasn't at the gym. I remember the evening of that dinner to the last detail. Their house in Lakeview was cozy, with a carved porch, an old oak tree in the backyard, and light from the kitchen streaming through the window curtains. Karen, Tom's mother, greeted us with a broad, strained, but polite expression on her face. She was wearing an apron with Buona Cucina embroidered on it, and the sauce was really stewing on the stove, thick, fragrant, with the smell of basil and something spicy. "So you're Emily," she said, staring at me intently. "Tom talked about you a lot." I smiled, slightly embarrassed. "I hope it's only good." "Well, that depends," she murmured softly, and I wasn't sure if I should hear it. Megan, Thomas's younger sister, appeared a little later, wearing skinny jeans and holding a phone in her hand. She gave me a look that was neither friendly nor interested. "So you're the fitness genius, right?" "What is it?" she asked, with a fake smile. "Tom said you could get anyone in shape. Even hopeless ones." I tried not to react, just smiled. "I think everyone has potential. The only question is who reveals it and how." The dinner was accompanied by careful dialogues and hidden assessments. I felt the stares on me like scalpels, cutting through clothes, behavior, every word. But the food was great, and Tom stayed close, kept the conversation going, laughed at my jokes, and didn't let the atmosphere get uncomfortable. When I left that evening, he walked me to my car and, a little embarrassed, asked, "Not too much?" "Well, didn't it get too tense?" I shook my head. "I can handle it. You've seen me do the 3-minute plank, right?" He chuckled. "Okay. Then the next training session is at 7:30, as usual?" I nodded and looked in the rearview mirror as I drove away. Their house was left behind, with the soft light in the windows and the scent of tomato sauce still firmly embedded in my mind. Something inside me was saying, that was the beginning. The beginning of something important. I didn't know what it was yet, but my heart was already beating differently. Tom and I got married on a hot September morning, under the clear Austin sky, with a light breeze passing between the rows of white chairs set up for our guests. It was simple, but real. Smiles, short speeches, vows made with a tremor in their voice. Then it seemed to me that our story was beginning, in which everything would be different. He was holding my hand, and at that moment I believed him. I believed that I would not be alone with him. A few days after the wedding, Tom came up to me in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, and casually said, "Honey, I thought maybe we should stay with Mom for now. This is temporary, just until we save up for something of our own. Besides, you know how important family is to her." I froze with a towel in my hands. All my internal worry started buzzing at once, but I didn't want to start our marriage with a conflict. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I asked cautiously. "I don't think your mom's not too fond of me." He chuckled, as if I was exaggerating. "Karen's just a little harsh. You'll get used to it over time. Besides, she'll be pleased to have us around. It's both her house and ours." I nodded. I wanted to believe that everything would work out. That love and respect can turn even cold into warmth. But in the first few days after moving to Round Rock, I realized how wrong I was. Karen's house stood on the corner of a quiet street, surrounded by lavandas and tall cypresses, but inside there was nothing of the softness and comfort promised by the exterior. Her gaze at our meeting was dry and precise, like that of a doctor examining a patient with no intention of healing. Megan, her daughter, greeted us with painted lips and a crooked smile that showed boredom and arrogance. "Have you decided to move permanently?" she asked with a raised eyebrow, looking at my suitcases. "Tom said it was temporary," I began, but she had already turned away before she could finish her sentence. At first, I tried not to pay attention. I was sure that if you were patient, if you were polite, if you did everything right, everything would work out. I got up earlier than everyone else to make breakfast, put things in order in the kitchen, where Karen preferred everything to be in its place. But no matter how hard I tried, there were more and more comments. "That's not how tomatoes are sliced," Karen said, looking over my shoulder. "The sauce will turn out watery." "You clean like a maid from a cheap hotel," Megan would snap when she saw me vacuuming the carpets in the living room. "Mom always said, if you do it, then do it properly." The irony was that they did almost nothing. The house seemed to be my full responsibility, and it was tacitly assigned. Tom worked from morning until late at night, and he wasn't around when I was judged for not meeting their standards. I tried to tell him how I felt, but he just sighed, taking off his shoes at the door. "Emily, they're just a little harsh. Try not to take it personally, okay?" I was silent. But a heavy, dense pressure began to build up in my chest, as if I were slowly sinking into water from which I could not get out. Pregnancy has become even more difficult. My stomach was rounding, my movements were slowing down, but my household chores were not decreasing. I mopped the floors, washed, cooked, all with a tense back and swollen legs. And instead of sympathy, I heard only reproaches. "Nowadays, women worked until the last day," Karen said, watching me try to lift a heavy laundry basket. "You're getting overly sensitive." One day, while trying to cook dinner, I decided to repeat the pasta recipe that Tom loved so much. I found all the ingredients, carefully chopped the garlic, put the water on the stove, and was almost done when Megan appeared in the doorway, leaning against the jamb. "It must be, what? What is it?" she asked, wincing at the smell. "Pasta carbonara," I replied, stirring the sauce. "It doesn't look like it. Mom would never add so much cream in her life." I was following the recipe, I tried to explain, feeling my pulse pounding in my temples. "Maybe the problem isn't with the recipe, but with you," she grinned and left, leaving a shadow of mockery in the air. Tom came home late. I served dinner without saying a word. He ate in silence, quickly. I was waiting for at least some kind of reaction. "What do you think?" I asked quietly. He shrugged, not looking up. "It's fine. It's just a little greasy." I gripped my fork so tightly that my fingers turned white. That evening, I was sitting in the bathroom, listening to Karen and Megan laughing behind the wall, discussing how America now makes pasta. Tears rolled down my cheeks and fell into the water, but I didn't let myself sob. I realized that I was a stranger in this house. Not a guest, not a family member, just a nuisance. Even Tom, my husband, was increasingly out there somewhere, in a restaurant, in his own world, where there was no need to choose between me and my mother. He chose silence. And silence, as I understood it, is also a choice. Every morning I woke up thinking, maybe today everything will change. Maybe Karen will smile sincerely. Maybe Megan will say thank you. Maybe Tom will finally tell, "I'm on your side." But day after day, everything was repeating itself, like a broken record. And the longer I lived in this house, the clearer it became, I was no longer a woman who looked at herself in the mirror with pride. I was a shadow. And, scariest of all, it seemed that no one noticed. At some point, the silence in the house stopped being calm. She became booming, tense, filled with unspoken reproaches and icy indifference. I walked around the house as if in a daze, listening not to myself, but to them, whether I was treading too loudly on the stairs, whether I was opening the closet too abruptly, whether I was washing clothes for too long. My life had shrunk to a maintenance minimum, and I felt like something was getting thinner inside, as if my soul was getting thinner every day, like a cloth that had been washed too often. But one day, standing in the bathroom with wet hair and a tired face, I looked at myself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman who was looking at me. Where was the Emily who confidently led the training sessions, inspired people, who could make the group move in unison with one glance? Where was the Emily who laughed easily and loudly, without fear of disapproving stares? I sat on the edge of the tub and thought, if I don't pull myself together now, I'll disappear completely. That same night, when the house was still in its usual silence, I snuck into the guest room, a tiny, almost storeroom filled with old boxes, bedspreads, and dusty books. In the corner, between the closet and the window, I found some free space. I brushed off the dust, spread my things, took out an old yoga mat and, as if in a trance, went after the camera. It was the same camera that I once bought to shoot workouts at the gym, but I never used it. I set it up on a tripod, checked the charge, and recorded the first workout, a short one, just 10 minutes, with light stretching and breathing exercises. My voice was trembling, my movements were stiff, and at some point I even forgot what I wanted to say. But I brought the video to the end, turned off the camera, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of strange, almost childish excitement. It was like something belonged to me again. I posted the video on YouTube, choosing a simple title, Fitness for Moms. Emily. I wasn't waiting for a response, rather, I was doing it for myself, just to remind myself that I still am. But the next morning, I found a few comments. Thank you, this is exactly what I needed today. How did you know that I felt this way? You helped me believe in myself again. I reread these words, and each line seemed to stitch up the wounds left by Karen's cold words and Megan's sarcastic grins. I started shooting more. At first, 3 times a week, then every day. I took pictures in the early morning, when the others were still asleep, or in the evening, when the house was frozen in a television nap. I spoke on camera, as if with a friend, honestly, without embellishment, about the difficulties, about the postpartum body, about the lack of time, about the guilt that mothers feel, not coping with everything at once. My subscribers were growing. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Women from different parts of the country wrote to me, shared their stories, and thanked me. I felt my shoulders straighten at those words, and strength was building up inside me again. I soon realized that I needed to improve the quality. I bought a ring lamp, a microphone, and learned the basics of editing on YouTube. The first few times, I sat at night, cutting out bad moments, overdubbing music, choosing screensavers. Megan looked into the room one day and saw me sitting with my laptop, wearing headphones and concentrating. "And what are you cutting there? What is it?" she asked with a grin. "Your great show." I didn't answer. I've already learned to separate her voice from the truth. Later, I found out that she told Karen that I spent my days playing blogger. And Karen just nodded, saying that's what idleness brings. But I wasn't paying attention. I worked. Every like, every new subscriber was like the bricks of my new home, invisible, but real. I no longer felt like a guest. I had my own corner. My camera. My viewers. And I knew that this was just the beginning. When I received the first offer from the brand, just a free batch of sports nutrition for being mentioned in the video, I was thrilled. A week later, another one will be paid. When the first transfer to the account came, I even burst into tears. Not from the amount, it was modest, but from the feeling that someone finally appreciated my work, my hard work, my time. Gradually, I began to earn more steadily. I could afford to buy groceries, pay some of the bills, and even gave Tom money for his restaurant when he came to me, embarrassed, asking for help. "Emily, I don't want Mom and Megan to know. Just, let's keep this between us for now," he said, rubbing the back of his head. I nodded. Then it seemed to me that I was doing the right thing. I supported my husband, because we are a family, right? But deep down, it hurt that he wasn't ready to say it out loud. It's Emily who's saving us. Karen and Megan kept calling me a bum. They had no idea that I was the one paying their electricity, water, and internet bills. That their comfort is paid for by my workouts, my sleepless nights at the screen, my responses to letters from women crying in front of the camera because they feel lonely. I remained silent. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that my time would come. My voice will get louder. In the meantime, I had my corner, my screen, my bright space in which I was listened to, appreciated, respected. There I became myself again. When Megan brought her new husband into the house, it became clear to me that there was no place for me here anymore. Not physically, not mentally. Their appearance marked a new phase in this house, even more fuss, even less space and patience. Megan was laughing out loud, arranging things in the kitchen as if it was already her kingdom. Her husband Mark, a typical handsome Texan with a touch of gruff charm, occupied my chair in front of the TV and shamelessly drank my almond milk, as if it had materialized in the refrigerator. And I, like a shadow, glided between the rooms, trying not to touch any of the new boundaries that were being pushed further and further every day. Alex and I felt cramped even in the air. He, my 4-year-old son, felt the tension on his childish level. He fell silent when Grandma Karen appeared in the room, looked for my hand more often than usual, and no longer ran around the house, but stepped carefully, as if afraid to disturb someone's peace. I tried to do everything so that he would not feel unnecessary. But when people rummage through your things without asking, when they shush you for turning on a cartoon, when your son is asked to play it quieter because someone has a headache, you begin to understand that you are not welcome here. Tom became almost a ghost at this time. He increasingly went to his restaurant on business, and one day, after packing up, he said he had to go to Houston for a couple of weeks, maybe a little longer. We need to resolve some urgent issues with suppliers. He kissed me absently, as if his lips felt neither warmth nor taste. There was detachment in his eyes, and as I looked at him, I felt a thin but sharp crack spreading in my chest. "I'll be back soon. Can you handle it?" "What is it?" he asked, already closing the door. I nodded, even though my heart wanted to scream, "No, I can't do this." But I didn't say anything. A few days have passed. Alex and I spent the morning in the park. He was jumping on the lawn, and I was sitting on a bench, scrolling through the new responses to my videos on my phone. A woman from Iowa wrote to me, thanking me for my motivation and telling me how she couldn't get out of bed after giving birth until she turned on my video. I smiled, feeling like I was doing something meaningful somewhere in the world. Returning home was a blow that I did not expect, although I may have anticipated it for a long time. I noticed it as soon as I got to the house. Our suitcases were at the front door. Mine, Alexa. Things were stacked unevenly, and something had already fallen out. His son's favorite car was lying right on the step. I stopped, my heart pounding in my ears like a drum roll. "Mom, are we going on a trip?" Alex asked, running up to the suitcases. Before I could answer, I saw movement behind the curtain. Karen was standing in the window. She wasn't hiding. She was looking right at me, with that expression I remember so well, a mixture of judgment and superiority. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. Only a minute later, the window opened slightly, and Karen's voice rang out clearly, like a bell in an empty temple. "You need to find a place to live. There is no more room here." "What? Are you serious? Where's Tom?" I came closer, holding my son's shoulder tightly with trembling hands. "Tom knows." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's better for everyone." I wanted to scream, smash that glass, pull out the door by the roots. But the next second, Alex pulled on my arm. "Mom, why doesn't Grandma open it?" I sat down next to him, hugged him to me, trying to hide the tears that burned my eyes. "It's okay, kid. We'll just wait a bit." But Tom wasn't answering his phone. I called him over and over, clutching the phone so tightly that my fingers were numb. Zero reaction. Then the message came. From Megan. "I think you should know what your faithful is doing," the message said. "There is a link below it." I pressed it. A social media page appeared on the screen. First, a photo of the dish. Then there are glasses of wine. And then Tom. Tom is with a woman who is clearly not a supplier. They were sitting on the veranda, her hand on his knee. He was laughing, and then there was a photo from the beach. His arms are wrapped around her from behind, and the sunset spreads out behind them like a postcard from an advertisement. Caption: "Love begins with simple moments." The world rocked. I felt as if someone had ripped out my heart and crumpled it up, throwing it into a puddle. I couldn't breathe. Alex sat next to her, fiddling with a toy, unaware that his mother's world was falling apart right now. I rented a hotel room nearby. A simple room, the smell of bleach, yellow curtains. We were sitting on the bed, I was stroking Alex's hair, and he asked quietly, "Mom, are we going to be here long?" I took a deep breath, pressing my lips together. I couldn't cry now. Not in front of him. No, dear. Just for the night. Everything will be better tomorrow. But I knew that everything wouldn't change tomorrow. It will not bring forgiveness, return, or explanation. It would bring me a new reality that I could no longer ignore. I looked out the window at the lights of the night city, and one thing was beating in my head: that's it, I've had enough. I'm not a victim. I'm not asking for love, I'm not begging for a home. I'll survive. No, I'll take back everything they took from me. Tom, Karen, Megan, they cut me out of their world. But I'll build my own. And it will be stronger than the walls of their house, warmer than their empty words. I swore to myself that night, clutching my son's hand, I won't let anyone throw us out the door anymore. When Tom finally called a week after his expulsion from home, his voice sounded restrained, but with slight anxiety. He didn't ask where Alex and I were, or how I was feeling. No. He said, "We need to meet. Discuss the bills. The restaurant is having a hard time again. Maybe you can, well, help." I listened to him talk, and every breath he took felt like another blow to my chest. How many months have I been paying their bills? How many nights had I spent working while he and his family thought I was nothing? I could have hung up. I could have made fun of him right then. But instead I said, "Good. I'll meet you at Karen's tomorrow. We'll discuss everything personally." I hung up the phone, got up from the armchair in the hotel room and went to the window. Behind the glass, the evening bustle colored the streets with amber lights. In the reflection, I saw myself, not the woman who was trembling from humiliation, but the one who finally raised her head. The one holding the divorce papers in her hands. I was ready. The next morning, I dressed simply but neatly, a restrained dress, my hair pulled back into a tight bun. There was no makeup on her face. I wanted them to see my true strength, naked and pure. I put Alex in kindergarten, kissed him on the top of his head and said, "Today we will start a new life, baby." As I drove up to Karen's house, I felt my heart thud in my chest. But not out of fear, out of determination. The house was the same as always, manicured lawn, flags on the porch, respectable appearance. Only I knew what lies were hiding behind those walls. Karen opened the door. Her smile was as cold as the wind in February. "Well, you're back," she said, as if we hadn't seen each other in a long time. I didn't say anything, but walked past him. Megan was sitting inside, plum-colored nails, phone in hand. Tom stood by the kitchen island with his head down. "Emily, thank you for coming," he began, but I held up my hand and he fell silent. "I didn't come to discuss the bills, Tom. I came to put an end to it," I said calmly, laying out the papers on the table. "Here are the divorce papers. I'm not going to be a part of this family anymore." Karen narrowed her eyes. "What kind of nonsense is this?" "Is this because of what?" "Not really," I smiled and took the printouts out of my bag. "This is a photo. Tom is with another woman. On the beach. In the restaurant. On the veranda. All during his business trip." There was silence in the room for a second. Then Karen's face turned ashen. "Were you spying on him?" I looked right at her. "They just sent me the truth. Your daughter." "Thank you, Megan." Megan opened her mouth as if to object, but quickly snapped it shut, blushing. "And yet," I continued, "you will no longer live at my expense. I paid for everything, the refrigerator, the washing machine, the dishwasher, even the blender, which you called a loafer's toy. I paid for everything. And today I'm taking it all away." Karen jumped up. "You don't dare." "I don't just dare. I've already called the movers. They'll be there in 10 minutes. At that moment, 2 men in work clothes entered the room. One looked at me, the other looked around the room. "Where do we start, ma'am?" "From the kitchen," I replied. "Refrigerator, blender, microwave." Then into the living room. Karen and Megan screamed in unison. Tom just lowered his head. "It's not fair," he muttered. "You're destroying everything." I laughed. "Tom, you ruined everything the moment you chose her. When I was silent, when I was kicked out. When I let them humiliate me. I'm just taking out the trash. Very expensive garbage." "I'm going to file for alimony," Megan shouted. "Let him charge you half. You're so rich now." I took a step closer to her, looking straight into her eyes. "Try it. First, let the court find out how much you owe me. And by the way, Tom, you don't mind if I attach copies of all the transfers I'd made to the restaurant, do you? Oh, and the screenshots of the messages where you asked to keep everything a secret? Let's play at justice." Megan shut up. Karen was sobbing softly, as if she had lost everything she had. And I stood straight, calmly. Without anger. Without revenge. Simply, with dignity. The movers took out the things, one by one. Vacuum cleaner, TV, coffee maker, my favorite blanket. I even took with me the books that I left on the shelf in the living room. I was ready to take every piece of myself back. When the last item was taken out, I turned to them. "Good, bye. I hope one day you will learn to appreciate the people who were there for you when it was convenient." I left the house without turning around. The sun was already rising high, and against its background, the building of Karen's house seemed darkened, empty. I got in the car, took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was breathing deeply again. I didn't just walk out the door of this house. I'm out of their power. From their lies. From their world. And now I was going to mine. Free. Real. Lively. When I finally severed my connection with Karen's house, it was like a long-awaited release from a dark dungeon. I thought it was all over, the breakup, the cleansing, the new life. But the past doesn't just go away. It begins to crumble into fragments, and these fragments then send you letters, messages, and voices from afar. They are knocking on your door like forgotten creditors, demanding your attention, help, and participation. And you look at them, understanding, you don't owe them anything anymore. Tom's restaurant didn't last long without my regular infusions. I knew things were bad there. I saw the numbers he was shamefully hiding from Karen. I knew how much money was being withdrawn from me every month. Without these amounts, the business began to sink, not immediately, no. At first, he tried to stay afloat. He borrowed money, sold inventory, and cut salaries. But it was like trying to bail out water from a sinking boat with a rusty bucket. 3 months after our breakup, the restaurant closed. Without any special announcements, without a farewell party, just a closed sign on the door and a hall in which no one else set up tables. I saw a post about it on social media. One of the former employees wrote an angry review in which he mentioned uncontrollable chaos, debts, and the disappearance of the owner. Tom didn't answer. And what could he say? Karen's house, the cozy one, drenched in the sun, with a neat lawn and carved shutters, went under the hammer. They had nothing to cover their debts with. I found out about it by chance, when I came across a realtor's ad. The photos of the rooms where I once mopped the floors on my knees were now processed in warm filters and accompanied by descriptions in the style of a magnificent space for a young family. Megan and her husband moved with Karen into a tiny rented apartment on the outskirts. One-bedroom apartment with gray walls and a view of the parking lot. The 5 of them lived there, Megan herself, Karen, her husband, a newborn baby, and their entire life, which was compressed to a minimum. But Megan's husband, Mark, couldn't stand it for long. 2 months later, he left. According to rumors, to his ex someone said that he was just tired of being Karen's second son. Someone whispered that he could not cope with the pressure, with eternal discontent, with screens at night and cold during the day. I wasn't watching on purpose. They just started writing to me. Megan first. The messages came like a cannon. I hope you're happy. She ruined everything. We're homeless now. You've ruined your family. My son will grow up without a father. You're so selfish. Do you think you're better than us? I read and deleted it. It was quiet inside. No anger, no pity. Just silence. Then other messages began to arrive, short and restrained. Emily, I was wrong. You're a good mother. Forgive us. We are in a very difficult situation. We need help. Sometimes Karen wrote. Her style was different, old-fashioned, almost ecclesiastical. I'm not asking, just, if you can. You were part of our family. Everything went wrong. If I had the opportunity to change everything. I was looking at the screen, reading these lines, but my fingers were not reaching for the keyboard. I've had a shift inside me for a long time. I no longer reacted to manipulation. I've learned to feel where remorse ends and despair begins. And their words were just that, a blind plea, the cry of the drowning, which does not necessarily mean awareness. Sometimes people just don't want to drown. But that doesn't mean they're ready to learn how to swim. I remembered Karen saying that pregnancy is not a reason to be weak. How Megan mocked my attempts to cook dinner. How Tom was silent when I was humiliated. I remembered everything. And that's why I couldn't come back. Neither physically nor emotionally. I chose myself. It wasn't easy. Being alone with a child, in a new home, starting everything from scratch. But it was freedom. And it was real. My son grew up in a house where there was no hissing behind his back. Where laughter sounded in the kitchen, not sarcastic remarks. Where you could leave toys on the floor and not be afraid of being called trash. Where I could work on my channel knowing that no one would snicker or roll their eyes behind my back. I wasn't taking revenge. I wasn't happy about their downfall. But I knew everyone has their own consequences. Everyone has their own price. They chose a path where they forgot about simple respect. I chose a path where I reminded myself of who I am. Now, when I turned off the bedroom light and closed my laptop after another workout, I felt only one thing: gratitude. Not for their actions. And for the fact that I survived. For leaving this house with my head up and not looking back. For the fact that I had the courage not to succumb to their new faces, their tears, their "we were wrong." Because sometimes second chances are just another trap. And now I knew that my place was where I didn't have to prove that I had the right to be myself. Our new apartment in Cedar Park welcomed us with warm sunlight streaming through the tall window in the living room. The room was small, with a wooden floor that creaked in the most unexpected places, and white walls that seemed to be waiting to be filled with life. First of all, I bought bright curtains with a floral pattern, hung Alex's drawings and put a ficus tree in the corner, which stubbornly held on to life even after I once forgot to water it. This place wasn't luxurious, but it breathed freedom. It was ours. Every morning began with the smell of coffee and children's laughter. Alex woke up before me, as always, and invariably climbed into bed with his stuffed animal in his hand. "Mom, are you going to dance on the mat today?" "I don't dance, kid." "I'm working out," I replied, tickling his tummy. No, you're definitely dancing. You're just pretending to be an adult, he laughed, snuggling up to me. I started my laptop, turned on the light, turned on the camera, and recorded a new video. All this has become more than just a work, a ritual. I was talking to the screen, but I knew that there were real women behind it, just like me. Tired, confused, but full of strength that they had forgotten about themselves. I addressed them not as a coach, but as a friend. Not as a mentor, but as a woman who has gone through a path of pain, loss, betrayal, and found a foothold in this chaos. The comments came one after another. Thank you, Emily. You are my voice of reason in the morning. You've given me back my faith in myself. I feel like I can be strong again. I'm watching your workouts with a baby in my arms, and for the first time I don't feel guilty for not being perfect. These words became anchors. They reminded me why I was doing this. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone anymore. I was just living my truth, and helping others find their own. One evening, sitting on the floor next to Alex, who was building a tower of cubes, I thought, what if I can give these women more? More than just videos. What if I can create a space for them where they will feel heard, accepted, and strong? That's how the idea of the course was born. I didn't know where to start, but I wasn't afraid. I found a designer who helped design the platform. I have written modules, not only physical training, but also psychological support, breathing exercises, and meditation. I recorded videos in which I talked about the fear of motherhood, about the body that changes, about the shame we live with because we are taught to be perfect. I gave the course a name, The Power Within. Because she's the one who saves when the whole world is falling apart. The launch was quiet, without fanfare. Just a button on the website, a post on social media, and a short video with an explanation. But 3 days later, I opened my mail and saw dozens of emails. I cried when I listened to your first module. You're saying things that we're afraid to even think about out loud. You gave me permission to be myself. Thank you. I was sitting in the kitchen, holding a mug of cold tea, and staring at the screen, unable to look away. I remembered those days at Karen's house, how I hid in the guest room, filmed my first videos in the semi-darkness, how my voice trembled and my heart beat from fear of being ridiculed. And now I wasn't just building a project, I was building a community. A space where women didn't have to choose between themselves and the expectations of others. Alex ran up to me, handed me a painted picture, Mom with a laptop and him, next to her, with a smile from ear to ear. It's us, he said. We're a team, aren't we? I squeezed him in my arms, hiding the tears that suddenly came into his hair. The strongest team, kid. The most. We had a hard winter together. There was little money, a lot of anxiety, sleepless nights. But now spring was entering our house, not only outside the window, but also in the soul. We weren't rich, but we had stability. I paid the bills, I could buy fresh fruit, I could enroll Alex in art classes. We went to the park on weekends, rode bicycles, ate ice cream. And every time I looked at him, I knew, I didn't just survive. I won. I was no longer afraid of loneliness. It became my ally. I wasn't afraid of the future. I built it with my own hands. I wasn't afraid of mistakes. I knew that growth was born out of them. One day, a woman wrote to me, who used to send the most caustic comments. She apologized. She said she was jealous. That she thought I was just lucky. And now that I've seen what I've been through, I understand, I'm strong. I smiled. Not out of pride, but out of understanding. We're all on our way. Every day, every step. And everyone has the right to be themselves on this path. Now, when I open my laptop and see a notification about a new order, I smile. Because it's more than a job. This is my voice, my footprint, my story. My freedom. And this world, with its new colors, with its silence without judgment, with its love without conditions, is ours. Mine and my son's. Our way. Our house. Our happiness.